Welcome everybody to this breakout session, Understanding the Traumatized Brain, helping clients move from anxious or depressed states into a socially engaged state. My name is Ruth Larwill. I'm the founder of Bloom Asia. It's an NGO that has worked with hundreds of sex trafficking survivors in Cambodia and the Philippines. So we provide trauma therapy and vocational training and employment for survivors. Basically, at Bloom, we want to be a safe place for survivors to heal their autonomic nervous system and to learn the skills that they're going to need to fit back into life. Well, as you can imagine, it's a pretty tough ask to explain the human brain in the next 30 minutes. But hey, like all of you here, I like doing tough things. So my hope is that by the end of the session today, you'll come away understanding that the impact of trauma is about how your nervous system integrated the experience. And I'm going to provide you with practical tools that you can use to heal and reset the nervous system. And if that wasn't enough to tempt you, I thought I would throw in as an added bonus the secret to a meaningful life. Are you ready? Okay. Does anyone think that they know what the secret to a meaningful life is? Well, the research data is in, and it is, drum roll, we are made for connection. At birth, humans are unable to care for themselves in any capacity, including being able to calm themselves when they're distressed. Their mother or primary caregiver has to help them regulate their nervous system through their eyes, their soft voice, and their touch. And those of you who work in mental health services will know that a lot of psychopathology is due to a primary caregiver being unable to provide their child with this connection. So, in fact, there has been really exciting research where neuroscientists have discovered mirror neurons. So that is, a child's nervous system mirrors the same neural patterns of their primary caregiver. So when a mother looks at her infant with love and empathy, the very same neurons that light up in her right brain light up in the child's right brain. And this is what is called interpersonal neurobiology. And research has now demonstrated that this same right brain to right brain connection happens between all humans. Well, as you can imagine, interpersonal neurobiology has profound implications for those of us working with survivors of trauma who need help to regulate their emotions. Through interpersonal neurobiology, each one of us personally, can be part of helping a survivor feel safe and reset their nervous system. Are some of you going, what's she talking about? Well, okay, let's do an experiential exercise. I'm going to show you a couple of faces, and I want you to notice what's going on inside of you as you look at the photo. What's happening to your heart rate? What's happening to your breath? And how is your own face responding to the image? Are you ready? So look into her eyes and see what's going on for you as you look. You're noticing your heartbeat. What's happening in your face? How are you feeling? I bet you some of you are wanting for me to change the image right now, right? Well, I will. The next face we're going to look at, I want you to see again how your body responds, your breath, your heart rate, your facial response. It's really interesting, isn't it, how the human brain is wired to pick up signals of connection and signals of disconnection in others. Well, now I'm going to actually show you a very short, powerful video of a famous experiment that demonstrates how an infant responds when her mother disconnects by taking on a neutral, not a mean or an angry face, just a neutral expression. Here we go. I had to wait to the bit that you could see that the baby is comforted at the end. And this experiment has actually been replicated many times across cultures. We are made for connection. So a child's brain is not born, it is built. What do I mean built? Well, okay, I'm going to use a computer analogy. So we're born with the hardware in our brains, which includes all the basic biological structures, the genetics and DNA. But the software that is actually going to shape our personalities is yet to be installed or downloaded into the brain. The software that I'm referring to is our lived experience. Now, you can see where I might be heading, because human trafficking is a lived experience that literally changes a person's brain and nervous system. But don't worry, all is not lost. The brain is remarkably neuroplastic, and it has the capacity to heal when in safe connection with others. So let's explore this a little further. How does the brain learn, shape, and develop? Well, firstly, how does the information even get to the brain? Well, information comes from our 5 senses, from our sight, our sound, our smell, taste, and touch, and from our gut. So it travels in microseconds along the longest nerve in the body, this nerve over here on the right-hand side. And this is called the vagus nerve. And it travels along here to the center of the brain, to the amygdala. And you can see my little arrow pointing to the amygdala in the center of the brain. So before any information arrives at our thinking brain, it is first processed by the amygdala. The amygdala is constantly scanning the environment for cues of safety or danger. Okay, so let's even dive further and look into the amygdala. Here we've got an image of the brain's memory systems. Our memories inform who we are, how we think, how we feel and behave. Without your memory, you're no longer you. So let's have a look at the different memory systems that we have, what makes us us. So these lower one portions down here, the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, they hold all of our muscle memories. The memory that we need to walk, ride a bike, hold a pencil. And then we go over to this little purple circle here, which is our amygdala. And the amygdala's function is to hold all of our emotional learning. It acts as a warning system or a trigger to automatically, there's no control over it. Based on our emotional memories, it will act and decide what to do and whether something is safe or dangerous. So it's interesting to note that our emotional memories are stored as images or pictures or sensations, not in words or language. So I'm moving over here now to the prefrontal cortex. This is actually where all of our lived experience is organised. It forms our opinions, worldview, general knowledge, and much more. I suppose you could call it our sense of self, who we are, what we like, what we think about, the dreams that we have for our life. And it's here in the cortex that our lived experiences are given language. A way I like to remember the function of the PFC, as we like to call it, the prefrontal cortex, it's where the L's take place, okay? Logical thinking, language, learning, laughing, because you're going to get a lot of information, so I'm trying to make it stick. The interesting thing about trauma is that when a stored emotional learning in the amygdala is triggered, our thinking brain goes offline because our brain knows that we're going to need every ounce of energy to protect ourselves from imminent danger. So the amygdala focuses on sending all of its messages to the heart to beat faster, our breathing to provide more oxygen to our body, to release adrenaline and cortisol to our limbs to prepare for us to fight or flee the danger. And if we can't flee, it will tell our body to freeze and shut down. After the danger has passed, our amygdala stores any new emotional learnings from this event to ensure our future safety. So, for example, many of our Bloom girls have learned to automatically disassociate when they're fearful because this was helpful to them when they were in their sex trafficking experience. It helped them escape emotional pain. So now they could be in a training class with us, in a hospitality class, and all of a sudden there'll be this sense of dread, this fear that rises up. I can't do this. This is too much. I can't remember all of this. And all of a sudden I will notice that their eyes become vacant and they've just sort of checked out. And because I can understand that this is a trauma response, I can gently bring them back into the present moment. So this is crucial information for those of us who are working with a survivor, because unless a survivor feels safe, their thinking brain is not engaged. They're going to struggle to take in any new information or make strategic decisions regarding their future. You can see where a lot of us struggle with the decisions that clients can make sometimes, and it really is helpful to have the compassion to understand what's happening in the brain. So I've heard that at conferences, you kind of come away remembering 20% of the information you hear, if you're lucky. So I love to do little things to help everybody remember the information that we're going through. So this is Dan Siegel's handy model of the brain. So if everyone wants to hold up their hand, if they feel comfortable, okay, and our forearm is actually going to be our spinal cord or our vagus nerve. And this fleshy part at the bottom of our hand is going to represent our muscle memory, the cerebellum. And in the center of our brain in the middle is our emotional brain. And over the top of that is our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain. So hopefully this will help you remember just a little bit about the anatomy of a brain. And remember that when information comes into the emotional brain that says it's dangerous, what happens is the PFC, or our thinking brain, goes offline. It's no longer there. So it's quite funny sometimes at Bloom, we'll walk around, and if somebody's, we'll just kind of go like this, which means we're going to have to help them bring that thinking brain back online. So let's dive even deeper still. Basically, we have to learn after an emotional learning that we have to adapt our behaviour to keep safe. I have a little video, and depending on how much Q&A I am going to get, I will show it at the end. But for time today, we're just going to talk about some of the behaviour that is a trauma response that has helped a client keep safe. So things like making yourself small or invisible, dissociation, like we just mentioned, people pleasing is a really big one. Perfectionism, anger, and it's an underbelly of seething anger and rage and rebellion sometimes. And they've learned that it's not safe to show it, but it's often there. Turning to alcohol, drugs, risky sex, scrolling through Facebook, TikTok, comfort eating, anything to numb overwhelming emotional pain. Self-harm when they've collapsed and they want to feel alive again. And so this is a takeaway from today. Every behaviour has a function. Whenever we see a client and we're thinking, oh, what's happening there? If we can remember, what is the function of this behaviour? And it will either be to connect, because that's an innate human feeling, or to protect themselves. So a lot of the learnt patterns that they've actually used to protect them, once they have come with us, are no longer serving them. Then it's no longer helpful. So let's do a little mini recap, just to make sure that we're all holding all of this information together and I'm not overloading you. Our body is continually scanning our environment for signs of safety or danger. Information is coming in through our 5 senses and from our gut. And this is going to be important soon when we get to how we actually can change our states. And it travels to our brain. It travels first to the amygdala, which reacts without thinking, and then to our PFC, our thinking brain. So once that information has travelled to our thinking brain, it's our thinking brain's job to make sense of all this information and create a narrative or story of what is happening in our lives. So we're building this narrative based on the information coming from our autonomic nervous system. Therefore, our autonomic nervous system is the heart of our lived experience. So we're moving on now to polyvagal theory. And yes, it's all about that vagus nerve that we looked at just a moment. It was developed by Stephen Porges in 2018. It was originally thought in the medical system that, sorry, I'm just going to move all my people over to the side. It was originally thought that there was two nervous systems. The sympathetic nervous system, okay, and if you can remember the word sympathy, and whoopsie daisies, sympathy means having feelings for someone, big feelings, and that you have, it's kind of, feelings are like energy. So I remember the sympathetic nervous system is feelings and energy. And then they also have the parasympathetic nervous system. I try and remember the parasympathetic nervous system like parachute, which slows you down. And so the sympathetic nervous system is giving you energy, and the parasympathetic nervous system is slowing you down. So I don't know if that will help you remember it, because sometimes you get a lot of jargon and terminology in these, and it can help you. But information travels along the nervous system, as you can see in this picture down here, via neurotransmitters, which are chemicals. And I'm sure many of you have heard of these chemicals, such as adrenaline, serotonin, etc. And these speed up or slow down our nervous system. Well, now neuroscientists have discovered that there is a third nervous system that we actually use, and it's called the ventral vagal system. We use this when we are in a socially engaged, connected state. So if we have a look at this drawing over here of the three different nervous systems, we see that the sympathetic nervous system follows the spinal cord because it's so much about movement and giving the body energy. But notice how it goes down here into the pelvic system. Okay, this is going to be really important when we get to the exercises in a minute. We also notice that the parasympathetic nerve also travels all the way down here to the pelvic abdominal area. And then we have the green lines, which is the ventral vagal, or when we're feeling connected to the world and socially engaged. Notice that it's mainly focused around the face, the neck, and the chest. So that's going to become important as we look at some of the exercises. I want to now explain the window of tolerance and just a little bit more about how the nervous system works, because this will help you when you're working out what sort of exercises to use with your clients. So if we have a look at this top picture up here of a healthy nervous system, I wake up in the morning and oh no, I've overslept. And my body starts making these stress chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol to help me move fast. It engages my sympathetic nervous system. I jump on my motorbike and I get to Bloom just in time for the staff meeting. At this point, my amygdala goes, oh, okay, yep, the danger has passed. And my parasympathetic nervous system, the slowing down system kicks in and it puts the brakes on. It stops the adrenaline that's been coming into my system. So a work friend then sees that I'm stressed and smiles at me and she gives me a little hug. Well, then my body actually comes into the ventral vagal system. Okay, and I feel connected. I start to make some oxytocin, which is the connection chemical. Well, then my boss asks me to start the meeting with a report from all of the activities during the week. I feel nervous because my emotional memory remembers last week when a few of the people laughed at my Khmer accent when I said some of the words, and well, now my sympathetic nervous system starts pumping back adrenaline into my system. I want to run away. My heart is beating fast. I start breathing a little more. But I find the courage, I give my report, my colleagues smile and thank me, I sit down and I let out a sigh of relief. So for healthy nervous systems, we are constantly in this normal range where our sympathetic system helps us when we need more energy and settles us and slows us down when we need to relax. This is not the case for the nervous system of a trauma survivor. So I'm just going to blow up this one here on the bottom so we can see it a little bit more clearly. So after a traumatic event, the amygdala is working overtime to watch out for danger. A person who has just been through a lot of trauma is living now in this story of self-protection. What's going to be happening to me next? How do I have to protect myself? This causes our sympathetic nervous system to become stuck in an on position, and adrenaline and cortisol flood our system. Well, many of you will have seen these different things that happen to somebody who's stuck in a sympathetic nervous system response. There's a constant anxiety, panic attacks, hyperactivity, and an exaggerated startle response. All of our Bloom girls, if the door bangs, all of them jump, and because they're in this hyper vigilant state, ready to be able to handle any danger that comes their way. There's a lot of digestive problems with survivors of trafficking, because if your body is in a sympathetic nervous system state, It is the digestive system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, is not even online. So it's very hard to digest food. There's emotional flooding, chronic pain, sleeplessness. How do you sleep when your body's flooded with adrenaline and cortisol? Well, after a long time of being stuck in the on position of the sympathetic nervous system, a survivor of trauma can suffer what's called adrenal fatigue. Their adrenal gland can no longer provide them with any more adrenaline. And so their system shuts down and collapses. This leads to a story of disconnection. And we'll see down here, these are the symptoms over here that show up when somebody's system has collapsed: depression, flat affect, they're emotionless, lethargy, deadness, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, disorientation, dissociation, pain, and once again, poor digestion. So a trauma survivor can swing wildly between these two states, but rarely spending time in this middle window here, a vagal state of connection. The state of our autonomic nervous system tells our story. It is either a story of connection, and you can see over here our little guy who's safe and connected with the world. When we're in ventral vagal, your feeling is, I'm curious about the world. I feel connected to the world. We call these the C's. I'm calm and compassionate, courageous and creative. I have clarity. Or we have a story of self-protection. The world is a dangerous place. I'm tough and I'm ready to fight anything that comes my way. If not, I'll run. Or is our story one of disconnection? The world is a terrible, isolating place. No one understands what I've been through. I'm abandoned and alone. So there's no state that's wrong here, because sometimes the world is dangerous and we need to fight. It's about recognizing which state are you in and having the resources to flexibly move between states and not stay stuck in one state. So our role in working with survivors of trauma is to actually help them and understand what it will take for them to move from a state of disconnection or protection into a state of connection. And I'd like to share here that most trauma survivors have no idea what a ventral vagal state of connection even feels like. So we often use an image instead of words because of low literacy of this safe and connected state is actually a playful puppy. And they most of the time look at you and say, I don't know what that feels like. They know what the fight or flight, and they know what this collapsed state. So it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work to gradually provide empathic experiences to slowly rebuild neural networks of aliveness and vitality that are stronger than the neural networks of protection and disconnection. So how do we help our clients regulate? How can we actually help them move back to a state of connection? I've done a little chart here to basically just help you get a handle on. It depends on where the state that they are in now as to what exercises you might like to use. So if they're in a sympathetic nervous system state, a state of protection, of anxiety, remember that their thinking brain is offline. Okay, so they're agitated, their heart is beating fast and their breathing is fast. So we'd like to respond to that and help them respond to that state using their brain. So we want to use words or counting to help re-engage the thinking brain, to bring their thinking brain back online. If they're in a collapsed state, a parasympathetic nervous system of depression, it is actually that their thinking brain, it's still offline, but it's flooded and overwhelmed. So what we want to do at this point is there's a hierarchy. We can't actually move straight from a collapsed state into a socially engaged state. We have to go up the ladder, and we have to involve some sort of bottom-up body movement to take them up into the socially engaged state. So we want to choose activities that are going to provide energy to the system. So some sort of movement. So one of the best activities that works for either state of disconnection or protection is what we started with, and that is the co-regulation, right brain to right brain. When you are actually with your client using your mirror neurons, because we're made for connection, that can actually help the client self-regulate, okay? So we want to use our kind eyes, okay? We want to use a soft, gentle voice, because there's a particular bone in our middle ear that actually is activated with a soothing voice, and it can calm down a nervous system. Now, because of these mirror neurons, you'll need to be grounded yourself. You need to be in a ventral vagal state of connection. And this can be hard if you've got a client that has disassociated or is very agitated. So I want you to remember that as we now go into doing some of these exercises, especially starting with the breath, you can use this breath work to get yourself grounded and in a state of connection, because your client isn't going to be able to regulate if you're not in a state of connection. So breath work, we've heard everyone talks about breathing, but it really is a well-researched, evidence-based technique to regulate anxiety. When we breathe out, we actually engage the parasympathetic nervous system. Remember the parachute slowing down? And it slows everything down. But when you breathe in, you engage the sympathetic nervous system. Like if you're running and you need more oxygen, and you'll even see people who are having a panic attack. How are they breathing? Taking short, sharp in-breaths. So we have to decide what state is our client in to see what is the best breathing technique for them. Because if a client is in a state of collapse and you're doing long out breaths, you're going to take them either into a further state of depression or collapse. So for anxiety, we want to use long out breaths. Now, it's important, it's just not a short breath. It has to be a really deep belly breath. So we've got a few ways that we teach this at Bloom, and one of them is to pretend that you're blowing out 100 birthday cakes on your candle, and you're going to get your magic wish if you get every candle blown out. So, when you think you've got no breath left, you still have that little bit left. And that's what you actually want to do. I could do a whole hour just on breathing techniques. So I know I'm going fast, and I have put some links at the end of this presentation where you can actually go and have a look at more of this information on breathing techniques. But it's long and it's an out breath. Now, this is the exercise, this next one, and you're all going to laugh at me. Well, okay, I'm ready for it, because I know it's going to help you, and it's going to put you in a state of connection so that your client will be able to mirror your state of connection. It's called, are you ready? The bearing down breath. So you're doing your long out breath, and we're going to practice it together now. And as you're breathing out, you'll notice that your chest starts to get heavy, and that's good. But we're going to go further than that, and we're going to push our breath down. And this is the funny part. You're going to bear down. And in the examples, they often say, like, for example, as if you're about to do a poop, or women can, or men can decide it's like as if you're giving birth to a baby. See, I told you were going to laugh. Okay, so this is called a bearing down breath. Can anyone remember that picture of the nervous system I showed though? Where are your nerves? If we want to reactivate, we want to change the vagus nerve, we've got to get all the way down into the gut. So let's just try it now with an outward breath, and we're going to breathe and bear down like in our abdominal area. Okay, we're ready? Is everyone bearing down, pushing out? Can you feel the release in your gut? It actually feels really good. And you don't have to make a big sound. I can do this when I'm with a client and they wouldn't know. Anytime you're anxious, you can do this, and it will literally change your nervous system from a sympathetic state to a state of connection. So the other really popular breathing technique that's really easy, and there's a lot, is what's called box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, empty your lungs for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath for 4 seconds. And I don't want this just to be a flurry of information, so we're going to actually try it together. And I've put this link at the end if you want to use this with your clients to train them. But let's all just do it together and practice. For those of you who can remember my slide on the sympathetic nervous system, what did I say that we had to use? We had to try and engage the thinking brain. And by counting, this actually helps the thinking brain come back online. So it's really important to count while you do this. Breathing in, hold, breathing out. Pretty precious, isn't it? I bet you all of you now feel a little bit more calmer, even just after having that. It helps as well to have all of that green nature in the background, and we'll have a little look at that, why that's important in just a minute. Posture. So remember, we were saying, how does the brain get its information? It's through the 5 senses and through that long vagal nerve that travels right through our spine. So posture, it's really important. I want everyone just to, if you feel comfortable too, just to slump over and kind of put your head in your hands and lose focus, gaze away. Just tell me how you feel. Are you feeling in a playful state of connection, ready to engage curiously with the world? Now sit up straight and imagine that somebody's pulling a string on the top of your head and you're like a puppet and they're pulling you upright. Okay, and you're leaning forward, curiously engaged with, what is this girl going to say to me next? You'll see for this picture of posture is actually referring to Amy Cuddy, who through Harvard has done incredible research that where you can increase your confidence levels by doing the superwoman posture or the superwoman pose. But posture combined with this next technique is a double whammy. A small smile. So not a big fake cheesy grin, because remember, our amygdala, our brain is getting its information from our senses. And so we're literally tricking our brain. It's kind of going, what's happening? Okay, she's smiling. She seems peaceful and content. Okay, I think things are good. I think things are good. Okay, let's move out of sympathetic and into a connected state. So posture combined with a small smile is a beautiful thing, and it's such an easy, sweet thing that our clients can do when they just need to have a shift in themselves, in their nervous system. Of course, we talked a lot about that if somebody is in that collapsed state where they're shut down, they're numb, they're depression, they're going to want to move their bodies. So I've put a link at the end of this presentation where there are so many YouTube videos for just like 5 or 10 minutes of full body stretching. This was a 10-minute full body stretch. So usually people who are in collapse or shut down in their disconnected state, they don't want to do any movement. So just finding something that's really quick, 1 minute or 2 minute, it can be just really helpful, and they can do it at home or wherever they are. But we're going to do something if they haven't even got the energy to pull up a YouTube clip or do a small full body stretch. We're going to actually do now a polyvagal exercise. So it actually bilaterally stimulates the vagal nerve. So if you feel comfortable, you can join with me, and you can get your left hand onto the left side of your head and pull gently down to your shoulder, to your left shoulder. I'm not a yoga teacher, so I probably should do this in reverse, but so you can just follow me if you like. Your left hand is pulling down to your left shoulder. Your right hand is going to just hold your waist, wrap around your waist. And now I want you to kick your hips to the left. So your body is making a C shape. And now move your eyes to the right as far as they will go, and hold your gaze steady to the right. This exercise engages the entire vagal nerve and resets it. So you want to just either gently breathe while you're doing this, but it has to have the eyes move to the right, because that's actually part of engaging your vagal nerve. And you can just go for as long as it takes before you let out a sigh, a yawn, or a swallow. And that indicates that the shift has happened. You've changed out of a sympathetic state of protection or disconnection, and you're now in ventral vagal. You can then do the other side, so it's just the right hand on your head to your shoulder. Hope everyone's following me, and I'm not doing this by myself. I can't see you. Hand on your waist, kick your right hips towards the right, and now we're going to look up to the left. Be gentle on yourself. You don't have to bend into a contortion C. Hold your eyes to the left. I'd love to spend minutes doing this, but unfortunately we don't have the time, and we've got to get on to Q&A. But this is a really great little exercise, and it's in a link as well at the end, which you can follow up. Of course, also mindfulness is important. There is just so much research. I wanted to just point out the difference between mindfulness and meditation. So meditation is when you're clearing your mind. It's important for trauma survivors that we do a trauma-informed practice of mindfulness. It's not very safe for a trauma survivor to do meditation where they let their mind go completely free, because they will usually orientate towards danger and have a memory, an emotional memory. That's just because their body is so used to looking out for danger. It's also not very wise to ask them to close their eyes. It is more helpful to ask them to look down to the end of their nose and just to soften their gaze, and that feels safer. And what we're trying to do is, because remember, we're tricking the amygdala, and we're trying to grow new neural circuits in their brain. So what we're going to do is use our 5 senses, all throughout the day. So they get up and have a shower and start to wash their hair. They look at the bubbles and they feel the sensualness of the soap. They smell the shampoo. They feel the water on their back. And they do this all through the day as they wash the dishes, as they prepare their lunches, they're engaged in their training, just teaching them, how can I use my 5 senses and be completely present? And this is a big thing for survivors because they're so used to disassociating. The next one on the list that's really helpful for changing a nervous system is to find beauty amongst the pain. Often that's nature, but something happens when we see something beautiful. Serotonin drips through our body, and that's the happy chemical. So this doesn't have to be nature, but I find that works even doubly effectively. But it can be looking at the eyelashes of your child while they're sleeping. You can find beauty in the most surprising places. Gratitude also has been researched to find that the happy chemical serotonin drips when you're grateful. And as we know, the neurotransmitters that are released in our nervous system, they're the ones that dictate our story. They tell our story. Are we feeling disconnected and collapsed? Are we in a state of self-protection, fight or flight? Or are we connected to the world? There's also a beautiful exercise, Leaves on a Stream, which we don't have time to go through today. And I've included that in a link at the end of the presentation. I'm pretty sure I can say if you do this exercise, you will be in a state of connection at the end of it. So you can do it on yourself first or with your team, and then practice and work using it with clients. It is really, really, really special. Remembering our ears and that special bone that's in your middle ear that detects a self-soothing or a soothing sound. So we can put, and that regulates your nervous system. So we can put together a playlist of the songs that soothe our system. And listening to that will change our nervous system capacity. So finishing off, we have to remember that every single person is unique. So part of our role as practitioners working with survivors of trauma is helping our clients find what works for them. So I like to use the word experiment. We're going to experiment and see what works. So then you don't have to worry if the C didn't work. It doesn't matter. What works for you? What is, and so we use what's called a regulating resources map, but you can use whatever, but it's basically a list of things that you've tried and what work for your client, things that they can do when they're alone by themselves, and things that they can do when they're with others. So we want to experiment what takes them out of an immobilized, collapsed, depressive state. What takes them out of a fight-flight state when they're feeling really, really, really anxious? What keeps them in a ventral vagal state of safe connection? What are the things that they really enjoy and they find that they can stay longer in this space? So working with our clients to help them find their way to ventral and be able to stay there. So guys, you've all just learned the science behind the meaning of the secret to a meaningful life. So it's not just something that you've been told. You've got, okay, this is research-based, evidence-based science behind the secret to a meaningful life. So I'll just recap now because I find that there's so much information and I just want to solidify it all and help you go, yep, got that. We're made for connection. Our brain is built through lived experience. Our nervous system is the heart of our lived experience. The state of our nervous system tells our story, a story of connection, self-protection, or disconnection. Everyone experiences different states within a day, but trauma survivors can get stuck in a state of self-protection or disconnection. The key is learning how to flexibly move between these states. So we need to help our clients experiment with ideas, find what works for you first, and then you can help work with your client. And finally, the biggest, most important point that I want you to all go home with today is we can use our empathy and compassion through interpersonal neurobiology to co-regulate a client's nervous system and help them move into a state of connection via our mirror neurons. So thanks everyone, and we'll go into some Q&A now. I've got a few different things for the geeks who really want to learn a little bit more at the end, and links that you can look up and all the references to this science at the end. But I'll pull up the chat now and I will stop sharing and hopefully a chat. Let's see where my chat box will come up. Aha, there we go. So what Q&A do we have here? Does anybody want to throw a question into the chat? No, the question is, do you have any experience with horticultural therapy for human trafficking survivors? I think this is just awesome because when we look at nature, serotonin drips. Nature, and you've heard of forest bathing in Japan and different European countries, nature is now evidence-based that it changes the chemicals in your body and changes your nervous system. So I think it's wonderful. There's a whole bunch of, there's pet therapy, there is equine or horse therapy. There's a whole bunch of different things which have similar ways. So it's working with what you're comfortable with. And remember that changing the autonomic nervous system is just the start, because if we're trying to do talk-based therapy or trying to help clients become more strategically thinking and their prefrontal cortex, their thinking brain is offline, that therapy is not going to work. First of all, we need to work with the nervous system. So thanks for that question, Susanna. That's really good because there is lots of different ways. And if I could have, I would have had an hour or two going into all of the different ways that we can change our nervous system, and it's very unique. So another question's come in. How do we maintain that connection state once the client finally finds it? Is there any exercises they can do by themselves? Alone time is the hardest. Amen, sister. That is so true, Maria. So that's why in that the regulating map, we work with what can the client do when they're by themselves. Does it work for them to do drawing or colouring in or knitting or crocheting where they can stay mindful? So we actually go, there can be levels, how to call a friend, etc. So alone time, as you say, is the worst for survivors of trafficking, and it's really important to be able to come up with different ideas for your client. And it'll be trial and error. Everyone's unique. Have you tried animal-assisted therapy for human trafficking survivors? Yes, I was just mentioning that. I don't know if that came across. Equine therapy is really important because of the mirror neurons. Animals are really, they can actually help. They've actually done experiments where when you pat an animal, your blood pressure drops, and you actually, which is changing your nervous system, and it's changing the story that your brain is reading. Thank you for this full of brain learning, okay? Oh, you want me to repeat the hand explanation? I will do so, but if you Google the handy model of the brain, you can actually find that also on YouTube with a step-by-step going through. I'll come back to that though if once I'll just check all the questions here. Oh, that's just a good thank you there. Would you say your relaxation exercises work for children? Yes, I would say all of us who have children should start with children. Teach them this. I wish they taught it in schools because mainly all of the problems that happen at school, right? A bully is in a sympathetic nervous system state of fight, and that's how they've learned to protect themselves. A child who's in collapse is not learning if she's numb, trying to push down all of her feelings with what's going on at home. And schools are getting better. The trauma-informed schools are being able to help children to learn to self-regulate their nervous systems. Well, I hope I got the question. And so, yes, so I would say all of these exercises are just becoming part of your life. Let's find beauty. Let's be grateful, gratitude exercises, moving every day. Yoga is the best kind of movement because it's movement and slow, intentional breaths. So yes, get your children started young. And the next question is, are there any clients that do not want mindfulness exercises because of all their bad experiences come rushing into their minds? So yes, that was why I had the two pictures of the mindfulness where your eyes are closed and you are not focusing on five senses is not a trauma-informed. It can be very challenging, difficult, and harmful to survivors of trauma. They need to keep their eyes open, to look down their nose and be using a different type of mindfulness where they are thinking about a specific, using their five senses. Are there any risks involved in any of these methods and or initiating these shifts in our systems? I don't think there is any problem with being in a state of connection or trying to move in to a state of connection. Especially, there's so much I could say, is why I've just halted here. It's more dangerous to stay in a sympathetic nervous system or in a collapsed system. One of the biggest things that happens to survivors of trauma is that they end up being in this state, this depressive state, this low state, shut down, numb state. Their thinking brain has gone offline, and so they're not strategically thinking, which makes them vulnerable to further exploitation and danger. So we often find that survivors get re-trafficked, or they can't, their parent in prison will ask them to come and visit them, and they will be sex trafficked to the prison guards, or they'll be re-trafficked, or vulnerable as children coming from a family of abuse, and their system is in a sympathetic state or a disconnected state. They're not thinking properly when they could be being manipulated or exploited, and it makes it easier to traffic somebody. So for me, there's nothing that could be harmful about being in a connected, curious, compassionate, creative, calm, courageous state. It's our true self, where we're meant to be, when we're healthy and alive. Now, that's not to say that we won't go to a sympathetic when there's danger, but that's how our body is actually made. And they call these blended states. So high extreme sports, for example, is a blended state between the connected ventral vagal and the sympathetic nervous system. So when you're going skydiving, you're going to have a little bit of both, and it's this very fine-tuned process. When you have, when you're eating or having sex, that's actually a ventral vagal connected state blended with the parasympathetic relaxed state. So I've done a very quick overview here, and if you've all got excited, you can look up some more links and do some more research. I just got you excited about learning more about this. There's another question. Is there an age limit in making your thinking brain online again? It's a very interesting question. Neuroplasticity gets harder as we age, but it's not impossible. If you're working with children, adolescents, or young women up to about 25, it is very effective to change neural pathways. After that, they will need more practice and more support, because neuroplasticity does get hard. But it's not impossible to do. It's just harder work. Any more questions coming in there? That was some great questions, everybody. Thanks so much. If you want to connect with me at all or you want more information, you can go onto our Bloom website, www.bloomasia.org, and you can contact, there's an email connection there that you can contact us, and we'd be happy to point you in the right direction or do even more training with your organisation. Or you can sign up. If you leave your email, you can sign up and get updates about the work that we're doing with survivors of trafficking. And my role now as Director of Trauma Aftercare is I really want to work out an evidence-based, what is the best way to approach trauma for those who have been in exploitation or coming through exploitation, because it is nuanced and it's not just like a single trauma, it's interpersonal, it is nuanced. And I'm really excited about where the research is going to take us and really what the best program is going to look like. So thank you all for being with me today. If there is any more questions, I think we have come to the end of our session.